Softball question.
Softball? I'm not familiar with softball.
Yeah, it's a phrase, like an easy question.
Okay, got it.
Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Who is a colleague that you're really glad to be working with?
Like currently?
Yeah.
Oh, that's not an easy one. And the answer, it's not you. So I wasn't sure if that's what you were waiting for.
You totally swung and missed that pitch, but go ahead.
I figured I would as soon as you said softball, Mike. I have a colleague that I work closely with. She now teaches in Harford County, but she's taught all over for the last 30 years. Miss Alice, shout out to you, Miss Alice, if you're listening. And I enjoy the work that I do with her because she has a wealth of knowledge and approaches the work as if it's her first day to learn something new. And I think that disposition is really inspiring. Yeah, and she has a great sense of humor.
She sounds great. How did you meet her?
We did some consultancy work together with a small cohort in the county, and we just remained in touch. And she's been a really good place to land softly after the hard days.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. How about you? I know that one's easy for you.
I think. Well, I was just thinking the other day, part of the continuing to do this work here at City Neighbors is because of all of the colleagues that are here. I think it just makes a huge difference for educators.
For sure.
I'm also really eager because today we have Kristina Kyles Smith, and she's become such a great colleague for me.
Amazing.
I learn a lot from her. We do a lot. We're involved a lot of good trouble together in a variety of different areas, and so it's really good to have someone who you can partner with like that.
Yeah.
And then, on this podcast, I have Justin.
Right. We both have Justin.
So this is great. Colleagues make all the difference.
Welcome to the Flipped Podcast.
Or Flip Ed.
However you hear it, this is a place for joy and dreaming of education.
In each episode, you will hear from educators with an idea, a vision, a revolutionary thought that could flip a switch and change schools for our changed world.
I'm LaShawn.
I'm Mike.
Welcome to Flipped.
Welcome to Flip Ed. Kristina Kyles Smith is a dynamic leader in education, dedicated to transforming schools and empowering communities. As CEO of Lillie Mae Carroll Jackson Charter School, Kristina has spearheaded innovations in school equity, leadership, curriculum design, and project-based learning. She holds an Ed.D. and is pursuing a Ph.D. in public policy, bringing practical and scholarly expertise to her work. Kristina has held key roles, including Assistant State Superintendent and Regional Director for a national professional development company. She has published articles on school transformation and equity. She's a recognized speaker, educator, and advocate for educational justice. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And she's a friend to us here in Baltimore.
So excited.
And who knows where this is going to go. So glad to have you.
In the words of John Lewis, let's make good trouble.
Love that. That's very appropriate. That sounds like an episode title.
This might be this episode title.
Yeah.
Okay, so pretend we don't know you.
Yeah.
Can you just give us a little bit of who you are, why you are an educator, of all the things you could do in the world, why an educator?
Yeah. In high school, I was a pretty decent student, 3.8 or so. I thought that was dope, and was offered a scholarship to college. And the only stipulation was that I became a teacher. So my family hadn't necessarily planned for college. So we said, yep, and here I am.
Seriously?
Seriously.
What did you think you wanted to do?
Soap opera star. I
That
was an
tracks.
avid Young and the Restless fan.
Okay.
And then it became neck and neck because I became a freshman and sophomore in college. It was soap opera or education.
And they didn't have any scholarships for soap opera stars.
Not that I had easy access to.
Okay. Great. Well, all of us in the educational world are sad we've missed the soap opera
Yeah.
part.
You have not.
Oh, it's still
okay.
coming. Okay.
It's still here.
Oh, got you.
I think education is a wide array of outlets and divots and crevets, and the best type of educators are those who wrap their passion and put it in front of the students in a way that lets them lift and launch. So I feel like I have taken all of my characters and put them into all the jobs I've taught. I've been a curriculum director, I've been a district official, I've been a principal, and I feel like in every time I have accidentally gravitated to just being the soap opera version of myself as it relates to being compliant and managing all the things and doing the things. But ultimately, I think that is what makes a good educator.
Wow. And your time in the classroom, what did you teach?
Oh, students. You
Good
like that?
answer.
You like
Good
that? You like that?
answer. Good answer.
I taught high school histories. My first year was crazy. Quick story. When I finished college, I went in Holland, Michigan, to a school called Hope College. Go Dutch, and moved to Boston. Moved to Boston. The way certification happened, I was a very highly qualified teacher in Massachusetts, and I was cheap because I didn't have a master's yet. So walking around fairs, I was like Beyonce, like, who is this girl right there with all this highly qualified, and she's cheap. So when I got into teaching, I was in a very cool high school called Framingham. It was one of the most diverse schools in the country. At that time, Clinton was in office. He actually visited, I think this was actually before my time, he visited Framingham because it was one that represented the country's demographic most closely. Wow. But my director put me in 5 different classes. I had 4 different preps, and my classroom was actually not even in the history department. I taught from a science room closet. My office was in a science room closet, and then I had to travel all the way to the history department and teach US 1, US 2, AP US history, psych, and African American history. I loved every moment of it.
Wow.
It was the best experience of my life.
That's awesome. So really, like our podcast, we're sitting with folks that have spent time in the classroom and are connected to the field of education in some way. And like we preface it knowing that like one thing that changes in a classroom won't change the educational landscape as a whole. But we're interested in like where folks are coming from in their perspective. If you could flip something, one thing, anything about education, about the classroom, that would make some significant impact, what would it be?
So many educators have found their way to children's hearts to pull the strings that have really ignited their own interest in learning. I think the ultimate goal is that when a student leaves you, they are on a self-sustained, on a self-motivated journey to continue to fall deeper into their passions and thoughts. Yes, they might have to do a little English and a little math, a little science, maybe a little STEM, but ultimately it's because they are just insatiably trying to find something. Yeah. I think that really comes from trying to create curriculum that's authentically engaging, that authentically connects to your students and connects your students to their community so that they not only understand how they are changed by the world, but also how they can change the world. So I'm really often engaged in curriculum development that helps students remember that they do not have to wait to be a part of the change they want to see, but they can jump in as soon as they feel ready, and that their learning guards that process. A lot of times that's project-based learning. A lot of times that's considered authentic exposure. A lot of times that's called deeper learning. But ultimately, it's this connection you see between a teacher and a student when you cannot stop them. I remember when I got to Baltimore, one of the funniest stories I had was I got a call. I was a principal. I got a call from a teacher from the police department who said, Ms. Kyles, I just want to let you know we got a alarm from your school. It's like 2:00 in the morning. It seems you have like 30 kids there right now. I was like, I don't understand why I have 30 kids. But technically, my science teacher had decided that all of her students needed to come and see her right away because they were going to go off on a trip but she didn't want them to lose sight of their work, to lose any momentum, or to miss their flight. So they all ended up trying to sneak up into the lab and spend the night there so they could catch their flight on time. That's the type of quest that we learn through NCLB, and sometimes through the reform of the 2000s. We've lost that. We've created teacher-proof curriculum, student-proof interventions, not those that just authentically connect that student to their community in a way that sustains that community and grows that community to where it wants to be in the future. So if I had any flip, it would be, how do we deconstruct curriculum and deconstruct learning experiences to, yes, meet the standards, yes, have students master the skills, but ultimately have them connect to the community needs that they feel like they are able to make a difference in.
Yeah. And who do you see holding this work?
You.
Yeah.
Just LaShawn.
Just LaShawn.
Okay, great.
Period. Point blank. And if you don't, I mean, ultimately, it's all of our responsibility.
Sure.
Every time a kid leaves your classroom and their light is dimmed, you did the opposite.
Yeah.
And I know that I left lots of classrooms lights dimmed. So I think if you decide to pick up the mantle and move closer to a school in any way, shape, or form, then it is your job to do it. I would love to see more high-level executives begin to shepherd policy, most specifically the local policies that clear the room for principals and school-level leaders to do this type of work more regularly.
Yeah.
To foster those teacher groups, the teacher leaders, the teams that can go out in the community and, be just talking and shooting the breeze one day and then say, I think we could save this tree, and then figure out how the students can be a part of that particular piece. Or have a question about, I don't know, let's say Tupac went to a school I was a high school of. How can we figure out how Tupac was inspired by this school and how this school is inspired by Tupac? And then let the kids just run on those types of things. But ultimately, it is a layered approach and a layered commitment to protect that type of learning space.
Do you have an example or two, either where you are now, Lillie Mae, or what you've seen in the work that you've done, like that particularly strikes you as like, this is the kind of work I'm thinking of for all students?
I can't lie. I think Lillie Mae is just a dream petri dish for this type of learning. I know that we have a lot of constraints around compliance and items that we need to, but when my first day at Lillie Mae, I was walking around with the principal, and a student ran out of the class upset. Came out of the classroom upset. She was upset because I think some students were talking about her hair or something to the effect. And so we both coached the kid to say, right now we're talking about school. We're not talking about your hair. So what are you supposed to be doing right now? I'm working on my monologue. What monologue? I'm working on my monologue for Colored Girls. Oh, this is a great monologue. Say it for me. Verbatim, she was able to give me her part immediately. And it just so happened that the part of her monologue talked about how much of other people's perceptions you let in and how much you don't let in. And so we were able to take that moment right there and know that what that teacher was teaching them was a very important, iconic piece of Black history, but also one that was going to change them and one that's changed their community, one that was already being in it was also playing at that time. I think it was a monologue we were watching a student group do at Morgan. So she was seeing this layered perspective of it, understanding how it affected college students, down to her, down to that, and literally grounded that student. And too often our curriculum just pads a knowledge check, not necessarily pads an internal revocation of what they need to do or where they would need to go. So I just feel like I get to do that work all the time. I also see, at Lillie Mae, we do expeditions. We do 3 expeditions a year. Our fall expeditions is grounded by humanities. Our springs are grounded by sciences. So my first year, we talked about some of the additions to spring that we could do, and we sat these teachers down, and it was really not disappointing. It was really disappointing.
Good clarification.
To remind teachers that they should be able to do what they dream. So what do you do if you could do what you really just hope to do? And so we kept pushing him and said, like, what do you think? Well, what do you want to do? Well, what do you want to do? And ultimately, we got to a place where fifth graders were studying athletic heroes who also engaged in social justice. No, that was in the fall. Water. They were studying, fifth and sixth graders were studying water. They studied a sister school in Africa called the Mango Tree, and their work for water. They studied water runoff from Moncton to the Chesapeake, and then they ended up calling in Brown Capital Advisory's leader, Mike Hankin, who is a big contributor to the Trash Wheel, to talk about the difference between Baltimore County water, surfaces and Baltimore City surfaces, and how they needed more green in the city to stop the trash from getting into the harbor. Seventh grade talked about Black beauty, and at that year there was a huge conversation about lye and what Black women were putting in their hair and why they were putting in the hair. So they ended up making soap and having a conversation with their mothers about when to use lye and when not to use lye. And eighth graders had this amazing expedition about what they call double heroes, Black women who were experiencing the issues of genetic or Black issues that plagued the Black community, especially Black women, but those who still fought for their community. Wow. And so they were able to interview Erica Bridgeforth and sit down with her and talk about it, or other women of that sort, and create this living museum. They studied the African American Museum, Reginald F. Lewis Museum, and then they created a museum for these women, talking about how, their genetics, how their DNA, this, that, and the third, and all ended up saying, so what does it mean for a Black woman to have the type of genes we had? So those things make these students have a great grounding of life ain't no crystal stair, but you'll get there, but also social capital and this ability to understand those and interpret those moving forward. It's just a really beautiful story.
Wow.
So you were an assistant superintendent. Weren't you part of the machine that prevents this from happening?
Yeah. Well, what?
Right? It isn't part of this standardization, bureaucratization, whatever that is of schools, right? How do you do this work? How do we make this work present in lots of different places? I
mean, I will say, I think Maryland is really an interesting place because we have several of the largest districts in the country simply because we run off a county system, which is so different from many other states that have city or local town localities that manage their school systems. So you think Michigan has 600 school districts. Maryland has 32. Massachusetts has 300 and something. So then their curriculum as local policy is a lot more tied to smaller bits and pieces of their community. When my first principalship was in a town called Marblehead, Massachusetts, in northern Massachusetts, and we were maybe 4.5 square miles, period, point blank. You could run the whole first square in the afternoon. I mean, if you felt like it. I did not. But so unfortunately, when Baltimore County or Baltimore City buys a curriculum, they talk about fidelity, not necessarily integrity. And a lot of the curriculums coming out today have scripts, and but those scripts are oftentimes made to be teaching aids to districts that have more alternative teaching programs, trying to help, new the profession educators build their locale, but oftentimes they become the requirement. Yeah. Long story short, I wasn't in curriculum. There you go. I spent my time at the State House as the other assistant principal of
assistant principal or assistant soup?
I was assistant soup, but I always felt like I was the assistant principal of climate for the state. But the curriculum is a hard where to have because, like I said, our districts buy big curriculum products and it's a big ticket item, and then they oftentimes pull their PD to try to put it into place with standardization. And when you do it at that big level, you lose the contours. I don't think Wit and Wisdom has a conversation about our local trees or our native trees, right, or our local waterways specifically, or the local fish that are in our streams. So if we do take our kids fishing, they might not recognize something. We're supposed to possibly switch them out so that when we talk about your grandfather fishing, or we talk about your great-grandfather's work in our local companies, or they are recognizable.
Yeah.
But when we buy big box curriculum, we have to do that work on top of it.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about like what happens for kids when you're thinking about the intentionality behind deconstructing curriculum so that it mirrors their lived experiences and what they're interested in? Like, what does that do for kids?
It puts them in the driver's seat with you. Versus being in the back seat, they're in the passenger seat. And then as soon as they turn 16, they're in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
Well, I think technically you could probably put them in the driver's seat of curriculum a little bit earlier, like 11, in curriculum talk. But it puts them in the driver's seat. And then you do become a coach versus a sage on the stage.
Yeah.
And I just think today it's so hard for teachers to do that with all of the constraints they're navigating. And we, as educational leaders, have the important job of standing at the door and doing the Care Bear stare, trying to keep those constraints out their building so teachers can just sit and think about what is possible.
Yeah.
I've not heard a good Care Bear reference in a while.
I have a couple of good ones.
Yeah. Do you have a particular Care Bear that you like? Okay.
Not anymore.
Okay.
I can't remember. But I do think that's our job. How do we just keep the classrooms? I mean, ultimately, nothing teaches students better than teachers when they have the ability to do the best thing they love to do. And so if you can bet on anything, you should, I'm not a big Army, Navy force person, but I think you're supposed to line up behind the field.
Yeah.
And let them let them go to work.
Yeah. I love this idea of like kids in the driver's seat. Like, I think that just perfectly sums it up. I think for like folks on the ground who they may not be in the rooms with the people creating the curriculum, like what is the starting point for them to begin to sort of shift the responsibility of teaching to allow students to be in the driver's seat, or at least in the passenger seat with them?
So I'm really inspired by the stories of educators, Black educators, pre-desegregation. I'm really inspired by how deeply they knew their content.
Yeah.
And how much they grounded themselves in their content, not only curriculum-wise, but many of them were able, and I studied the history of like Dunbar's teachers, and many of them were able to, at any given time, move from, say, a Nassau government contract to a Morgan professorship to a high school teachership to an elementary school principalship. Like there was the depth of those particular areas allowed for them to be considered at the highest level of content acknowledgement, to the ability to map it over. And I think we have begun to appreciate appropriately the fact that like we need people who love kids, and we can teach them the content, but there's a balance between that, because it's hard to really navigate the contours of the curriculum and the content and the standards in alignment with where your students are and bring them to where they can be, and do it with a relevance to their own themselves without having the nimbleness in the content themselves. And so as I go back to framing him myself, my first teaching job, I was constantly pushed to learn my content, constantly pushed to own my content, kicked out of the room to go to, historical societies or to professional developments where I learned more about history by myself, and then come back and chop it up and be in those particulars with a large department who could come check me out and be like, you got that fact wrong. Well, ma'am, I'm trying. It's my third year. And they'd be like, So I think that's the one thing we really want to do, is give teachers the ability to really be own to be honored as both educators, but also content experts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks for being here today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Wow. Well, that was great. She really is incredible. I'm not sure how she works with you so closely, but we can figure that out in another episode. What are you taking away?
I really just appreciated a lot of what she talked about in terms of connecting curriculum to like really local context.
Yeah.
It actually harkens back a little bit to me about Goldie's curriculum that she created when we met with her.
Yeah.
Earlier this season, in terms of Goldie leaving space in the curriculum that she created so that teachers can adapt curriculum to their very immediate spot wherever they are. Of course, that requires giving teachers flexibility to do that, and space and time, and being connected enough in the community to know what those things are that are local context. But I just think that's it has a lot of power for kids to see what they're learning in the classroom have a very strong through line to their immediate world right outside the doors.
Yeah, I think I'm similarly, but on the other side, I'm thinking about like the power for teachers. Like, what if there was a space where we just gathered teachers and allowed them to write curriculum, and we paid them and we gave them the resources and the time that they needed to sit as content experts and to create curriculum that connects kids to their communities, that are straight out of like on the ground classroom things that they're seeing every day that they can be lit up about teaching to kids. I just wonder what kind of impact that would have on the kids, on the community, on the teachers, on everybody.
I just think about with that, just the creative juices that would flow with that, and how immediate it would have to be, because even if we wrote curriculum here in Northeast Baltimore, it might not be the same thing that you could write in Northwest or someplace, right? It has to be so local, so powerful, so immediate for teachers.
Exactly. And I think that it would require us and everyone to see teachers as experts. Yeah.
Thanks, Kristina.
Yeah.